You've hit the nail on the head. The government is not ours. The government is not acting in the interests of the American people, quite the contrary. It is acting against the interests of the American population. And this is something that people out in the rest of the country understand. I mean, here within range of Versailles on the Potomac, that doesn't even occur to anybody. But the truth is, we've got a huge problem. This government is not ours. Stop and think about something. And this is something I didn't know because I'm not plugged in a lot of ways that say Tucker Carlson is. But Tucker Carlson was talking and pointed out that Mark Levin and Ken Dubovitz from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, which is just a Jewish Zionist front organization, had both been sent down to advise Admiral Cooper on his conduct of the war. This Israel first thing is out of control. 80% of the members of the House and the Senate are receiving cash benefits, monetary benefits from Israel lobby or lobby-related organizations. This is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. We have sailors, I'm being told, who are jumping off the USS Abraham Lincoln because they've been on board ship since 21 November. And we now are getting reports of sailors who have actually been injured or killed in violent activity, violent rebellion, if you will, on board, a carrier. I don't know the details.
A mutiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, if you've never been to sea, you can't appreciate what it's like to be out there for month after month after month after month. I mean, even the Royal Navy, which was hardly a humanitarian organization, eventually had to come to terms with reality. You can't treat people like slaves. And you had a rebellion, a mutiny in the fleet. And they changed a lot of the things and made sure. And today, most navies in the world are scrupulous about minimizing long duration cruises. In other words, 3 months, 4 months, come home, go into port, spend time there. We have neglected that. I mean, even in the Russian military, which is a tough organization, very sensitive to pulling people out of the line, getting them back, shower, clean up, rest, relax, and then come back again. They don't leave people there for month after month after month. This is a peculiar American problem. Our Navy's got a big problem with it. Even if you go back to World War II, people were assigned to units when they landed in Normandy. The only way to get out of there was to be killed or wounded. The Germans were, up until the end of the war, were still rotating units. And it was very difficult for them as they'd lost a lot of manpower. But they were always sensitive to the morale. They learned the hard way during World War I. And even in World War I, they were much more humane to their own troops than we were. My point is, it's a huge problem. I think, to get back to the core question, when we start talking about a strong government, we have to have a government that is interested in us, that protects us, that nurtures us. What do we want from a government? We want a government that shelters us, that protects us, and ensures that we're fed. Protection means inside, thanks to the police establishments, as well as outside. Those three things, I think, have fallen down because we are clearly an Israel first government with Israel first policies at the expense of everything and anything. That's what matters. Everything else is secondary or tertiary. That has to stop. And I think the other thing that has to stop is that we have to get out of this business of assuming that the rest of the world needs an American military presence. It doesn't. It absolutely does not. The whole idea of global hegemony is a dangerous myth. It's bad fiction. First of all, it's not necessary, and nobody in the world wants it. So those things have to go. We got to get rid of those things. So we have to get control of our government. Now can we win that at the ballot box?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So how's this going to wind up? It seems like we're heading towards something that looks like a civil war.
I think I don't like to call it civil. I think some of it is rural versus urban. You've got a lot of people that live outside the cities who think one way as opposed to the people in the cities. The cities, we have these, what are they called? Sanctuary cities. You don't have sanctuary neighborhoods, sanctuary counties, maybe some sanctuary states. But on the whole, the people that don't live in those urban areas are not sympathetic to those policies. So I think there's a rural versus urban split. And then there's the racial divide, whether we like it or not, it's real. And anybody who grew up in the 60s, as I did and as you did, we looked at what was going on. We were very sympathetic to the civil rights movement and everything that happened. Today, we are living in a different country. And the hatred and the animosity and the hostility of non-white groups is really quite shocking. It's something that I could not imagine being the case after what happened between 65 and 1980. That 15-year period, I thought, was a profound period of change. I remember when I was a major, I was standing on a tank range and I came down from the tower and I saw this black soldier who I knew very well, very, very solid man, frankly, mechanic and a generator mechanic. Let me tell you, generator mechanics in the military were always worth their weight in gold because if the generator quit, everybody was screwed. So you had to have really good people there. He was one of the best. And he was reading the biography of Malcolm X. And we got into a discussion. He got very animated. And I said, well, so what's the plan? Arm up and kill all the white people? And he looked at me. And I said, it's not a very practical solution, is it? First of all, there are more of us than you, and we all have guns. And he started laughing. This is 1980, 81, 80. No, this would have been 1990. I'm sorry. But he did not go down that road. But an awful lot of other soldiers I saw privately did. And there was no real reason for it. In other words, they were not victims of anything. But it was this almost tribal mentality. And I think that's what we've got across much of the United States. I have a good friend. He was in Vietnam as a Cobra gunship pilot. Then he ended up moving into the intelligence services, saw a lot of action. Very brave man. Happens to be his grandparents were from Mexico, or maybe his parents came over when they were little. He speaks fluent Spanish. If you heard him speak English, you'd never know he was not any different from any other American. And he and I have talked about this. It's a problem. And I don't know how you find an easy solution, but he gets disgusted all the time because he is quintessentially an American. And he hates people that aren't. But we have, I think this happened under Obama, and I think we've ignored it for years, what I call the hybrid American problem. Either you're an American or you're not. Don't tell me you're something else and then American. Forget that crap. Either you're an American or you're not. I think we got to go down that road. And we have to find ways to unify us, but we have to accept the fact that we're not going to get everybody on board. And all of us, I haven't run into anybody that wants violence. But how much do you endure before you finally say that's enough?
Yeah, and it does seem that we are moving toward authoritarianism. I mean, even within great bounds, Trump's actions and Biden's actions before him, with all the executive orders. I thought I saw an article in Axios where they talk about Trump, whether he's worried about the midterm elections or not, and he says he's not concerned because he plans to govern through executive action. Like that's a movement toward that, toward away from, at least the way things have been done traditionally. But that jump to real authoritarianism has got to happen through some crazy catalyst of some kind, I imagine.
Well, remember that one of the first things that Abraham Lincoln did, even before he mobilized troops and the so-called Civil War actively began, is that he suspended habeas corpus. And people on the Hill went berserk, said he's a dictator. He was. And he held the country together and he fought a war that a lot of people didn't want to fight. We can talk about whether or not it was really necessary. That's another discussion point. It was a tragedy in our history and 1 million people died tragically and, in my view, in a way that was unnecessary, but it doesn't matter what we think it happened. You were talking about FDR. If you spoke out against FDR on the radio, which is what everybody listened to, the radio station lost its license. That was FDR. Richard Nixon actually pointed to FDR and said, FDR weaponized the IRS. Why can't we do that?
That's right.
None of this stuff is new. The difference is if we're going to, in this particular direction, what are we trying to achieve? And, Cromwell did what he did to hold the country together, and he did hold Britain together very well. He did a lot of things that people didn't like. In fact, my ancestors were Quakers, were all in Cromwell's army.
Mm.
And after the war ended, they were so appalled by the excesses of violence that they had witnessed that they became Quakers. That's how I'm here. They all migrated to Jersey and Pennsylvania and ended up in Philadelphia. So, I mean, no one is saying that Cromwell was perfect, but Cromwell was really the model for George Washington.
Interesting.
And Washington, as president of the United States, did a number of things without consulting anybody. He raised an army and sent it into war. He destroyed the Indian nations. And he issued orders to Anthony Wayne, who commanded this army of 6,000. And in the orders he wrote, if you happen to run into any British fortifications, any British troops, you are to destroy them. Okay, this is President Washington. Nobody knows this. Well, you know what the answer was? Well, that was George Washington.
Yeah, well, he does seem to have he does get a pass.
Yes. And the same thing was true for Cromwell when he did some of the things that he did because he was seen in the same light. The country through these things. Oh, Trump. Trump can't find his anal passage in the dark. I don't think he's even in charge. This man is nothing when I remember it all. And he's surrounded by, somebody said the other day, maybe 7 people. And these 7 people are making the decisions. And you know who's behind those people. Marion Adelman and, people of that genre. So I don't know what's going on. Why would he be doing anything at this point in the Persian Gulf? I mean, it just
makes no sense at all.
Yeah. He would otherwise, if he were a free agent, he would say, we're out. We've done all we could. We'll pursue these matters through different channels. But right now, my focus has to be the United States and what's happening here. He'd be cheered from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But those aren't his donors.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of us early on in this recent Trump term thought that he was going to do things that were more authoritarian, but needed to be done. And Doge was an example of that early on, which gave a lot of us hope, that he was basically running over these agencies and doing what seemed like totally rational, but had to happen. Of course, all that fell by the wayside. But Doug, that's an example of where authoritarianism was something we were celebrating. Like it really was pushing that stuff forward in that way. And instead, he took this crazy U-turn, and I feel like the authoritarianism is still growing, but it's growing in the worst possible direction. Where he's maybe it's not the worst possible, but for example, his efforts to line his own pockets are so many things seem so fundamentally inept that his administration are doing, and yet they are on the ball when it comes to getting in the right place at the right time to make sure that they are grifting off the system. It's shocking, actually, the level of precision that they're using for that.
Well, he's created a culture of manipulation, and the 7 people that are surrounding him in the White House are heavily engaged in that. So this is a new level of corruption. I'm sure it's not the first time. I'm sure if we went back, we could find other examples, but it certainly seems to be, gotten to the point of unacceptably bad. I mean, look, Nancy Pelosi walked out of her position, what was $100 million. And, everybody on the Hill's involved in insider trading. I don't care what anybody says. I've heard that from people working up there at staffers. They all know it. The graft is out of control. But I mentioned Cromwell because that was his great gift. He recognized what he was up against and the corruption involved. And, they tried to bribe Cromwell. He was offered literally generational wealth to spare the life of Charles I. He said, no, this man must be removed. We are badly in need of a Cromwellian figure. And that's the only way you're going to get it done.
Doug, who do you think is going to win the upcoming midterms? And then who do you think is going to be installed in 28?
Well, first of all, I don't know that it makes much difference who wins the midterms because both sides are committed to bad policies. They're not going to fundamentally change anything.
No.
So, I mean, everybody's, what if the Republicans lose? Well, what have the Republicans done for you lately?
Yeah, what if they win? I don't know.
I'll tell you something that's been handled badly that could have been handled better, but still have been problematic is this ICE business. I mean, I have people now that I've known for years, they're supposedly right-wingers, and they're criticizing ICE. And I finally realized that there was no preparation of the American people for ICE. There was no public affairs initiative to go out and explain what ICE was going to do and why they were going to do it. There were no rules set forth. I mean, I knew growing up in Philadelphia, if a policeman's executing his duties, if he's arresting somebody, you don't go within 20 feet of that policeman. You just don't do that. I learned that as a child in school. You don't interfere with the police when they're conducting their operation. There was no preparation for this. And then suddenly people are flown in or drive in from around the country to obstruct the implementation of federal law. I mean, that's a federal offense. That's treason. We went to war over that. So that should be stopped. We shouldn't be in the Persian Gulf. We should be enforcing federal law here at home. Now, if somebody doesn't like the federal law, then I suggest that they make an attempt to change it, legislate it, take it to the Supreme Court, but do not interfere with the police. Nobody says that. Nobody wants to even go there. So that's why I say, again, we're still living in abundance. We haven't reached scarcity yet. When we hit scarcity, things will change. I think that's true in Europe. I think that's true here. How much? I don't know.
So we have a depression-like environment again, that and whoever's president at that time, like FDR was during the 30s, that person will have the opportunity to make massive changes. And I guess we almost have to hope that the person who happens to be at the helm at that time has Cromwell-like thinking, doing the good for the overall or whatever, versus what we're likely to have, whoever that is.
Well, see, don't make the mistake of taking the linear view of American history or any history. Just because things went a certain way for years doesn't mean that will happen in the future. All you have to do is look at the French Revolution. France was probably, in its day, the richest country in the world. Yet they managed to impoverish themselves through stupid policies. The aristocracy paid no taxes. The army was sent to North America to fight the British and help us. Bad decisions that emptied the treasury, which was already in bad shape when Louis XV died. He was a profligate spender and an idiot. And that we don't even need to talk about John Law. I'm sure you've done that in the past. We're back at John Law right now. I think he's running the treasury.
Yeah.
Anyhow, my point is that I wouldn't assume that this whole election business continues to work. As things break apart at high levels, we could end up like Sri Lanka. I'm sure you're familiar with what happened in Sri Lanka.
I was just there last year, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and they left the building, so to say. The government got into cars and drove away in the middle of the night. I wouldn't exclude that from happening here. Then all this talk about we're going to share and share alike, and everybody's going to live in a socialist paradise in New York City, that'll go down the toilet quickly. There's no future for that. So once all these things begin to happen, I think the revolutionary environment will certainly seem more like France. Maybe it'll be somewhere between what happened in England and what happened in France. Or for that matter, what happened in Germany.